slide wasn't enough for him, so he came up with this one. Dan, he was born and raised in the suburbs of Salt Lake City, crowned by the world's greatest mountains. Yes, Denver, Wyoming, Idaho, California, world's greatest mountains. Populated by thrifty, industrious people of intense conservative Christianity, Salt Lake is a perfect place to create work steeped in mystery and heritage. In addition to curse words, sweat, ink, paint, tears, and vectors, Dan sometimes overuses cryptic symbols from Utah and Mormon history to illustrate stories of exile, secrets, faith, and the parched, sunburnt West. Here's Dan Christofferson.
Let me pop this sucker off because I'm kind of a hand talker, so we have to get into this shit, all right? Yeah, me too. All right, my name's Dan Christofferson. Like you said, I was born and raised here. Tonight, I wanted to talk a little bit about my influences, specifically the idea of maximalism and kind of this over-elaborate, don't know when to quit, just calm down, Dan type of design. So kind of the opposite of how I work is simplicity, you know, designers who will pull everything away and simplify until it's perfect. I just kind of keep adding until I'm 3 days late on my slides and have to turn it in. So this is an illustration I did. It's coffee, stained paper, and pencil about these two elephants fighting. Thank you. The name of that piece was called Elephant Fight Us. This is a painting in typical Dan style that I just kind of couldn't do a traditional painting, so I painted this piece that's called Manners Before Mayhem, and I designed and built this 150-pound wood frame to go with the painting. The frame alone cost me $500 and I sold it for $700, so. The idea of kind of lavish richness and exploring that has kind of always obsessed me. This is a piece I did for a design shop in Portland, and they asked me to paint something on their front wall, and I got some chalk and some gold paint and did the damn thing. A little whistle over here. These are a couple pieces I did based on some stories and some narratives from Salt Lake City. I love the idea of fantasy. You know, Salt Lake and our background is so full of stories and these kind of fairy tales that you know, you tell somebody or you bring the story of Salt Lake to somebody and they're kind of blown away. They're like, what do you mean crickets and beehives? And so, you know, these were some posters and some illustrations I did for the AIGA National Convention that, thank you. They depicted 6 stories from Utah history: the Deseret Alphabet, the crickets. This is Salt Lake that I have tattooed on my throat. You know, it's a city that sticks on your bones, and it's a city that you want to talk about. It's a city that everything about it kind of creates stories and richness and excess, and that's sort of where my my history comes from and my design. So I love the idea of talking about, you know, this group of exiled religious believers that came to this blank canvas and envisioned this, you know, lavish valley full of castles and cathedrals and buildings. And it was growing up near this amazing castle in the snowy mountains, you know, that was supposed to be kind of built between God and man. It was this amazing story that, when I was older, brought me to Europe. And I'm trying to go slower so this next slide pops up, boom. You know, I lived among these amazing, lavish castles in the snowy mountains of southern Germany. And you know, this obsession with kind of over-the-top design and, you know, richness and excess, this maximalism just kind of stuck in my head as I studied, you know, these buildings and these cathedrals, and I would go in there and, you know, just look up and sketch. And from the little corners of the tile on the floor to the chandeliers and the ceilings, everything is just impeccably filled with detail, which is, you know, just one of those things when you live in aesthetic, your mind just soaks all of that up, and you catalog it, and you I personally just became obsessed by it. You know, the idea that that culture just fills every little crack with this meticulous artwork is something that has created this monster inside of me to fill the world. So I started, you know, living in these cities in Europe. I started realizing they were set up in a very familiar way to me. You start to see that every little corner of these huge cities is filled with impeccable design and detail and teeny shops, and you know, they spread on forever, and they, just like the ceilings of their cathedrals and their castles, all of these cities are just packed with lavish aesthetic, which made me think of, you know, it was all very familiar to me, and it brought me back to the idea of my own art and my own design, and I kind of likened it to the idea of a sketchbook. You know, the way we work with sketchbooks, I'll sketch something on one page and then flip it over to the next page, but these European cities made me think of filling a sketchbook and then you're done. You don't have any more room and you have to go back to the first page and start filling in all the corners. And their cities and their culture is sort of packed like that. And the point that I think Salt Lake City is at is we've sort of filled our book, and now we're going back to start to pack in this aesthetic and this culture and this music and this art. So to me, you know, coming back from Europe and being sort of baptized in this rich, lavish culture of the old masters, I was still a young kid. I loved skateboarding and BMX and graffiti, and it started evolving into, you know, apparel design and skateboard design, and I loved spray painting. You know, you can see, if you sort of squint, you can see this richness in, you know, street art, and for me, it was easy to start moving into that. So after I had kind of, you know, painted murals and illustrated, there was one more canvas that I kind of hadn't got to yet, right? So, being a maximalist and being that type of person that had to fill every little corner of everything with detail and illustration, I'm kind of dedicated to it, and I'm going to finish this project. So here's the promised topless shot. A little backless shot too. I think on the right side, if you look, you can see a little bit of butt cheek too. So y'all got to see some tonight, right? So the point that this maximalism and this lavish illustration gives me is kind of a calmness. It's, you know, it's taking all of this absurd chaos of design and aesthetic, and it's cataloging it and creating these beautiful visuals out of all of that. So it's almost like, as I fill every last corner of a page or finish the last little tattoo on my body, it feels almost like, you know, when you mow that last bit of lawn, or you comb over just a little bit of carpet with your vacuum in your living room, and everything gets smoothed out. So thank you.
So before I introduce our last presenter, I'm going to get all our thank yous and all that kind of stuff all the way, so we can end on a good note. You don't have to